I'm Callum Ridgway, 33 years old, and there was a time I believed my life was in good shape. Just 3 months ago, I would have told you my marriage to Marissa was stable, maybe even something to be proud of. We had been together for 7 years, and I thought we had figured out how to stay together, even with our differences. Marissa grew up in a world of old wealth, big estates, private tutors, and family names that carried weight. I came from a working-class background. My father repaired cars, my mother worked as a nurse, and we got by with just the basics. When we met, I was a guy who fixed computers. She was charming, smart, and didn't seem to care about my roots. I truly believed we were equals, or at least I tried to convince myself we were. But looking back now, I realized the cracks were always there. Her family, especially her mother, Blee, and her older brother Gregory, never accepted me. Being around them always felt like I was on trial for something I didn't understand. They smiled, but it was that cold, forced kind of smile that never reached their eyes. Marissa always shrugged it off, saying, "Give them time, Callum. They'll come around." I really wanted to believe her. But 7 years is a long time to wait for people to stop treating you like you're beneath them. Things had been tense between us for a while, small arguments here and there, but nothing I couldn't handle. Then came the annual family reunion in New York. Marissa pleaded with me to attend, promised it would be different this time, that her family would finally see the real me. I didn't want to go. Honestly, I'd rather spend the weekend fixing broken laptops than deal with her relatives, but I went for her. The estate was massive, an old colonial mansion balanced on a cliff, full of winding staircases and chilly, echoing hallways. It was breathtaking in a way that made you feel tiny, like you didn't belong unless you were born into it. From the minute we arrived, I could feel their judgment in every glance. Blee greeted me with a limp handshake, and Gregory smirked like he already knew something I didn't. The whole weekend felt like an exam I hadn't studied for. Every conversation was a trap. I'd mention the weather, and Blee would correct me with some snide remark. Gregory threw digs at my job, asking if I'd ever aim higher. I smiled, nodded, laughed it off, but inside, I was burning. Marissa told me to stay calm, said they didn't mean anything by it. But I could tell by the look in her eyes, she knew they did. By the second day, I was counting the hours until we could leave. I stayed polite, kept my head down, but it felt like trying to hold sand in my hands. It just kept slipping away. Dinner that night was the last straw. We were seated around a long, polished table, with candles flickering and silverware clinking. Marissa gave my hand a small squeeze under the table, like she was cheering me on. For a second, I felt hopeful. But Gregory started up again, louder this time, and Blee joined in, criticizing everything from how I sat to the shirt I'd worn. The pressure was crushing. All those eyes waiting for me to slip up. And for some reason, I decided to make a toast. Maybe I just wanted to prove I belonged, or show them I was more than just an outsider. I stood up and spoke from the heart. Nothing fancy, just words about gratitude and being part of the family. But halfway through, one of her cousins started chuckling, quiet and cruel. My face flushed. I tried to push through, raised my voice slightly, and said, "I mean it." That shut them up, briefly. Then Blee stood, slow and stern, and said, "We don't allow tantrums at the table, Callum." Like I was some child having a meltdown instead of a man trying to be sincere. I looked to Marissa, hoping she'd say something, stand up for me. But she just stared into her wine glass like it held all the answers. I sat back down, my chest tight and my heart heavy. Dinner went on like nothing happened, but I was done. I knew in my gut something had broken. Later, back in our guest room with its velvet curtains and oversized bed, I stood silently for a moment, staring at the floor. I yanked off my tie. It felt like it was choking me, and looked at Marissa, who was already perched on the bed, arms crossed. "What was that, Callum?" she asked sharply, like I was the one who'd done something wrong. I took a breath. "I've had enough, Marissa. I'm done with this." She rolled her eyes. "You're too sensitive. They were just joking. You didn't have to cause a scene." A scene? I hadn't yelled, hadn't slammed anything. I just tried to give a toast. I moved closer, fists clenched. "I'm your husband, not their target. I've put up with this for years, and you've never defended me. She stayed calm, too calm. You don't understand. This is just how they are. You need to deal with it. Deal with it? 7 years of being disrespected, and her solution was for me to just swallow it? My voice trembled, but I kept it steady. I shouldn't have to deal with it. You should have had my back. Instead, you let them treat me like nothing. She sighed, annoyed. You're blowing this out of proportion. That's when I broke, quietly but completely. No, Marissa. I'm not. I'm done pretending this is fine. I'm done letting them treat me like I don't belong. Her arms dropped and she stood, her tone turning cold. You have 2 choices, Callum. Apologize or leave. I froze. The room went still. Apologize? For speaking honestly? I waited, hoping she'd soften, take it back. She didn't. Okay, I said, voice firm but shaking. She blinked, surprised. I didn't wait. I grabbed my duffel from a closet, tossed in a few things, zipped it, and walked to the door. You're really doing this? She asked, voice cracking. Yeah, I replied, not turning back. I left. The hall was dark. The house was silent except for faint voices downstairs. I rushed past portraits of ancestors who seemed to glare at me as if they knew I didn't fit in. I reached my truck, threw the bag in the back, started the engine, and drove off. That cold mansion in the rear view kept shrinking behind me. I didn't know where I was going, just that I couldn't go back. Not to the condo we shared. Not to a life that felt like a trap built with her family's approval. I drove into the night, past quiet towns, phone off, heart pounding. Eventually, I saw a sign for a tiny airport. No plan, no idea, just a need to go. I walked in, bag slung over my shoulder, and asked the man at the counter, "What's the next flight out?" He barely looked up. One way to Oregon. Leaves in 40 minutes. $200. I'd never been there. Didn't know anyone. But it sounded far. Far from all of it. I'll take it, I said, handing him my card. He printed the ticket like it was no big deal. To him it wasn't. But to me it meant freedom. I sat by the gate, heart still racing. Not with fear, but something that felt like release. Like I was finally free. The plane was small, one of those tiny puddle jumpers with cramped seats and just one aisle. But it didn't matter to me. I squeezed into a window seat, buckled up, and stared out at the dark runway. When the engines roared to life and we began moving, I could feel the earth slip away beneath us. As we climbed higher, all the weight I'd been carrying seemed to vanish. Up there, 20,000 feet in the air, it was just me and the hum of the plane. No voices telling me what to do. No eyes judging me for what I wasn't. I kept my phone off for the entire flight. Didn't even check it when we landed. I didn't want to know if Marissa had called. Didn't want to hear her ask why I left or tell me to come back. The airport in Oregon was bigger, but still peaceful. The kind of place where people moved slowly and didn't ask too many questions. I rented a car with cash, an old sedan that smelled faintly of stale coffee, and drove toward the coast. I didn't have a map, just a vague sense of heading west until I hit water. By the time I arrived, the sky was beginning to lighten, gray and soft with the promise of dawn. I found a cheap motel near the beach, the kind with peeling paint and a neon sign that flickered. The woman at the desk didn't care who I was or why I was there. She took my money and handed me a key. The room was small, a bed, a chair, a sink with a cracked mirror, but it was mine, at least for now. I dropped my bag, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the faint sound of the waves outside. My hands trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from the rush of everything that had happened. I'd done it. I'd walked out, bought a ticket, and ended up halfway across the country with no plan and no apologies. I wondered what Marissa was doing at that moment. Had she told her family? Were they laughing, saying they always knew I'd break? I could picture Blee shaking her head, Gregory smirking, and Marissa sitting there, maybe confused, maybe angry, but probably not chasing after me. She'd given me the choice, apologize or leave. And I had taken the door she never thought I would. I lay back on the bed, staring at the stained ceiling, letting the quiet settle in. No one knew where I was. No one could reach me. For the first time in years, I wasn't answering to anyone, not her family, not even the version of myself that used to plead for approval. The air smelled like salt and freedom. And even though I didn't know what would come next, I knew I wasn't going back. Oregon was a fresh start, a place where I could breathe without someone telling me I was doing it wrong. I closed my eyes, the sound of the ocean filtering through the thin walls, and thought, this is it. This is mine. The one-way ticket wasn't just a flight. It was a line I'd drawn, and I wasn't crossing back over it. I'm Callum Ridgway, and those first few days in Oregon felt like stepping out of my own life and into someone else's. A better one, a quieter one. I woke up in that little motel room with the cracked mirror and the sound of waves sneaking through the window. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself to anyone. My phone was still off, shoved deep in my bag, and I wasn't ready to turn it back on. I didn't want to know what was waiting for me. Missed calls, texts, whatever Marissa or her family had to say. I just wanted the silence, and Oregon gave it to me. After a quick shower in that tiny bathroom, I grabbed my things and checked out, figuring I'd find something more permanent. The woman at the desk didn't even glance up when I dropped the key off, and I liked that. No questions, no hassle. I drove along the coast in that rented car, the ocean on my left, gray and endless, and the trees on my right, tall and green in a way I wasn't used to back east. It was beautiful, but not in an overwhelming way, just steady, like it didn't need to show off. I ended up in a small town, the kind with a single main street and a few shops that seemed to have been there forever. There was a sign in a window, studio for rent, $600 per month. I pulled over, called the number, and met a guy named Tom, who smelled like fish and handed me the keys after I paid him in cash for the first month. The place was nothing fancy, one room with a kitchenette, a bathroom, and a view of the water if you leaned out the window just right, but it was mine. I dropped my bag on the floor, sat on the lumpy couch, and let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding. That first day, I walked down to the beach, hands in my pockets, the wind tugging at my jacket. The sand was cold beneath my shoes, and the waves rolled in slow and steady, like they were telling me to take my time. I felt lighter than I had in years. All the weight from Marissa's family, their jabs, their rules, their expectations, had stayed back in New York. I picked up a couple of freelance IT jobs online, easy work I could do from anywhere. I bought groceries at a little store where the cashier smiled at me like I was already a regular. It was simple, and simple was exactly what I needed. By day 3, the peace started to crack. I kept my phone off, but curiosity, or maybe stupidity, got the best of me, and I turned it on. The screen lit up with notifications, one after another, like a storm rolling in. Marissa had called 10 times, leaving voicemails I didn't listen to. Gregory sent a text, "You're a real piece of work." Running off like that. A message from her mother was longer, something about how I disgraced the family and abandoned my responsibilities. I scrolled through it all, my stomach twisting, but I didn't let it sink in too deep. I'd heard it before. Anger, blame, and I wasn't carrying it anymore. There were messages from my sister too, worried ones, and a few from my friend Dorian, just checking in. I'd get back to them later, but not yet. I deleted the group chats Marissa had forced me into, the endless threads of her cousins planning brunches and her mother sending passive-aggressive reminders about etiquette. My phone felt cleaner after that, like I'd scrubbed away a layer of grime. The calls kept coming, though. Marissa again, then Gregory, then an unfamiliar number, probably Blee using someone else's phone. I didn't answer. I didn't need to hear the panic or the anger. Didn't need to know if they were cursing me or crying. I already knew the script. I was the bad guy, the quitter, the one who couldn't handle it. Fine. Let them think that. I sat down at the little table in my studio, opened my laptop, and typed an email to Marissa. It wasn't long, just a few lines. I'm safe. I'm not coming back. If you need to contact me, speak to my lawyer. I didn't have a lawyer yet, but I'd get one soon enough. I hit send, shut the laptop, and leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. No apology, no excuses, no room for her to argue. That was it. The last thing I'd say to her for a while, maybe forever. The phone buzzed again, but I turned it off and tossed it on the couch. Outside, the sky was turning pink over the water, and I stepped out onto the tiny balcony, breathing in the salty air. I could hear seagulls and the distant hum of a boat. This was my life now, quiet, my no one else's rules. I didn't know how long it would last, or what they'd do next. But for those first 48 hours, I'd found something I hadn't had in years: peace. Silence wasn't just the absence of noise. It was the absence of their voices, their demands, their judgment. It said everything I couldn't put into words. I'd walked away, and I wasn't looking back. The waves kept rolling in, steady and sure. And I let them wash over me, drowning out the past one crash at a time. They left everything in chaos. He deserted us. I could hear Blee saying, her voice thick with that fake hurt she always mastered. He was unstable, Gregory would add with a smirk, like he'd always known I'd crack. He couldn't handle the pressure, Marissa might say, her voice soft and sorrowful, like she was disappointed but not shocked. I didn't have to guess much. I'd been with them long enough to know how they'd twist it. They'd gather around that large table at the estate, sipping wine, picking me apart, convincing themselves I was the one to blame all along. But I wasn't there to listen, and that was the best part. I had people who saw things differently, people who believed in me, you could say. My sister Ellie had seen me shrink over the years, trying to fit into Marissa's world. After every visit to their house, she'd call me and ask, "Why do you let them treat you like that?" I'd brush it off and say it wasn't a big deal, but Ellie knew better. My best friend Dorian was the same. He'd been there from the beginning, back when Marissa and I were just dating, and he'd watched me fade into the background of her family. "You're not yourself with them," he'd say, and I'd laugh it off. But he was right. They both tried in their own ways to warn me that I was losing myself. Now, with them gone, I could feel myself coming back to life. Marissa didn't file for divorce right away. I wasn't surprised. She wasn't one to act quickly. She'd wait, play the game, see if I'd break first. Blee told her I'd come crawling back, begging for forgiveness, like all the others. I could hear her say it smugly, certain that I was just some predictable fool. Gregory would back her up, saying I didn't have the courage to stay gone. They'd sit there, plotting how long it would take for me to crack, wondering how many days before I showed up at the condo with an apology. But days turned into weeks, and I didn't call, didn't text, didn't show up. I sent that one email. "I'm safe. I'm not coming back. Talked to my lawyer," and that was it. Silence on my end drove them crazy. I could picture Marissa checking her phone, waiting for something that wasn't coming. Her mom telling her to be patient, but I wasn't playing their game anymore. Out here in Oregon, I was breathing again, really breathing. Not just holding my breath between their judgment and expectations. The air was fresh, filled with salt and pine, and it filled my lungs like it was cleansing me of the years I spent suffocating. I'd walk the beach in the mornings, hands in my pockets, watching the waves, and it was like they were smoothing over the rough parts of me. I didn't need much, just my little place, my work, and the quiet. I deleted their voices from my phone, their faces from my mind, and every day I stayed away, I felt stronger. Like I was building something new from the pieces they tried to break. I thought about my mom sometimes, how she raised Ellie and me on her own after Dad died. She worked long hours at the hospital to support us, never apologized for who she was, never tried to be anyone else. I'd forgotten that part of myself. Marissa's family had made me feel small, like I had to prove my worth. But out here, I didn't have to prove anything. The people I met, the guy at the grocery store, the lady at the coffee shop, didn't care where I came from or who I'd been married to. They just said hello, and let me be. It was simple, and simple meant freedom. I kept my phone off most of the time, only turning it on to check in with Ellie or Dorian. They'd both cheered when I told them I'd left. "About time," Ellie had said. "I knew you had it in you," Dorian had laughed. They were the ones who reminded me I wasn't crazy for walking away. Marissa could wait all she wanted. Her family could spin their stories, but I wasn't going back. The dust had settled, and I was still standing, stronger, quieter, and finally free. I'm Callum Ridgway, and 2 months after landing in Oregon, I had to go back. Not to stay, not to fix anything, just to get what was mine. I'd been living light in my little coastal studio, working freelance, breathing the salty air. But there were things in the condo I couldn't leave behind forever. Not the furniture or the fancy stuff, Marissa could keep all that. But the small things that mattered. My mom's old books, a watch my dad gave me before he passed, a couple of photos of Ellie and me as kids. Those were mine legally and otherwise. And I wasn't leaving them in her world. So, I booked a cheap flight back to New York, rented a car at the airport, and drove to the condo on a gray Tuesday morning. The whole trip felt like walking into a memory I didn't want to relive. The familiar roads, the hum of the city, the weight of it all creeping back. I didn't tell anyone I was coming, not Marissa, not her family, not even Ellie or Dorian. I wanted it quick and quiet, in and out before they could turn it into a fight. The condo looked the same when I pulled up, sleek building, glass windows, the kind of place her money had picked, not mine. I still had my key, and it turned in the lock easily. The door swung open to that sterile, expensive smell I'd never liked. The place was empty, or so I thought. Marissa's shoes weren't by the door. Her coat wasn't on the rack. I breathed a little easier and got to work, pulling out a couple of boxes and starting in the bedroom. I grabbed the books from my nightstand, the watch from the drawer, and some clothes I didn't mind taking. It felt strange being there without her voice in the background, without her eyes on me like I was about to mess something up. I was halfway through packing when the door opened behind me. I froze, hands on a photo frame, and turned to see Marissa standing there. No warning, no call, just her in that little coat her mom had given her, the one that cost more than my truck. She looked the same, dark hair pulled back, face calm, but her eyes were wider than usual, like she hadn't expected me. "Callum," she said softly, almost shakily. I nodded, keeping busy with the box. "Just getting my stuff." I didn't look at her too long. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her, standing there like she didn't know what to do. "You really meant it," she said, and it wasn't a question. I nodded again.
"Yeah."
She moved closer, her boots clicking on the hardwood, and I could feel her trying to read me like she always did. "We can fix this," she said, using that practiced tone she always used when she thought she could talk me into anything. I shook my head, slow and sure, and kept packing. "No, we can't." She went quiet then, and I thought maybe she'd leave. But she didn't. She just stood there, arms crossed tight, holding herself together. "You didn't even try," she said after a moment. There was a bite to it now. Anger, like I'd been waiting for. I stopped, looked at her straight on, and said, "I tried for 7 years, Marissa. You didn't." Her mouth opened, then closed, like she didn't know how to argue with that. I went back to the box, stacking the photos, feeling the air get heavier. "You never fought for me," I said, my voice steady, though it hurt to say it out loud. "You fought to keep me quiet, to keep them happy. But you never fought for me." She flinched slightly, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Maybe guilt, maybe realization, but it was gone fast. "That's not fair," she said, but her voice was weak, like she didn't even believe it herself. I shrugged and taped up the box. "Maybe not, but it's true." I grabbed the second box, started on the living room, some old records, a mug I liked, and she followed me, hovering like she wanted to stop me, but didn't know how. "What am I supposed to tell them?" she asked, and I knew she meant her family. I didn't look up. "Whatever you want. I don't care anymore." That hit her hard. I could tell because she went quiet again longer this time. I kept moving, kept packing. When I was done, I had 2 boxes in my bag, ready to go. She was still standing there, coat on, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. "Callum," she said. "One last try." I shook my head again. "I'm done, Marissa. Take care." I walked past her, out the door, down the hall, to the elevator. She didn't follow, didn't call after me. And when the doors closed, I felt that weight lift. I drove straight to the airport, shipped the boxes to Oregon, and caught the next flight out. Back on the coast, I landed under a sky full of stars, the ocean waiting for me like it always did. That last visit didn't change anything. It just closed the door I'd already walked through. She still didn't get it. Still thought it was about fixing something broken. But it wasn't. It was about letting go. I'm Callum Ridgway. And after I got back to Oregon from that last trip to New York, I started building something real. Not just a life, but a version of myself I'd lost somewhere along the way. The boxes from the condo arrived a few days later, and I unpacked them slowly, setting my mom's books on a shelf I'd picked up at a garage sale, hanging the photo of me and Ellie on the wall by the couch. The watch from my dad stayed in its box for now. I wasn't ready to wear it yet, but knowing it was there felt right. That little studio by the coast was starting to look like mine, not just a place to crash. And every piece I added made it feel more solid. I've been freelancing since I got here, fixing people's tech problems online, but I decided to push it further. I started advertising my services around town, handing out flyers at the coffee shop and the hardware store. Word spread quickly, and soon I had steady clients, small businesses mostly, who liked that I didn't overcomplicate things or overcharge them. They didn't care that I wasn't from some big-name family or that I'd married into money they'd never see. They just cared that I showed up and got the job done. It was a kind of respect I hadn't felt in years. And it built me up, brick by brick, into someone I could stand to look at in the mirror. The town was small, but the people were good. Honest in a way Marissa's crowd never was. I met a guy named Pete at the diner one morning, a fisherman with hands like sandpaper, who'd nod at me over his coffee like we'd known each other forever. There was Sarah, who ran the coffee shop and always slipped me an extra muffin when I came in saying, "You look like you could use it."
They didn't ask about my past.
Didn't need to know my tax bracket or who I'd been married to. And that was a relief I didn't know I'd been craving. I started hanging out with them more, grabbing a beer with Pete after his boat came in, helping Sarah fix her ancient computer when it crashed. They became my people not because I forced it, but because it just happened. Natural and easy. I got back in touch with Ellie, too, calling her one night after I'd settled in. She picked up on the first ring, her voice bright and loud. "Callum, you're alive," she said. I laughed and told her about the studio, the ocean, the work I was doing. She said she was proud of me, and I could hear the truth in it. She'd been waiting for me to break free longer than I had. We talked about Mom and Dad, about how she was doing back home, and I promised I'd visit soon. It felt good having her voice in my ear again, like a piece of my old self slotting back into place. I started hiking on weekends, following trails through the woods or along the cliffs, things I never had time for back east. The air was sharp, the views wide, and it cleared my head in a way nothing else did. One Saturday, I stopped by the local shelter on a whim and came home with a dog, a scruffy little guy with one ear that stuck up funny. I named him Booker after nothing in particular, just a name that fit. He followed me everywhere, trotting along on walks or curling up by my feet while I worked. He didn't ask for much, just food, a pat on the head, a quick run on the beach, and giving him that made me feel steady, like I was good for something again. It's funny how the simplest things started to mean the most. I'd sit on my balcony at night, Booker snoring beside me, listening to the waves and watching the stars prick through the dark. The work was picking up. I was now working full-time, setting up systems for local businesses, fixing networks and people. Counted on me, trusted me without needing to know my whole background. I swapped the polished floors of the condo for this creaky little place, the noise of the city for the soothing hum of the ocean. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I'd spent so much time in Marissa's shadow, trying to fit into her family's rules, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand tall out here. I didn't need to explain myself,
Didn't need to apologize for where I
came from, or what I didn't have.
Pete
Would clap me on the back and say, "Good to have you around, Cal." And Sarah would smile when I fixed a printer. That was enough. Booker would nudge my hand with his wet nose, and I'd laugh, scratching his ears, marveling at how simple
It was to make him happy.
I had found.
Peace.
Not the loud, dramatic kind, but the quiet type that slowly sinks in and sticks around. It was in the salty air, the steady flow of my days, the way I
Could hear my own thoughts again.
I was rebuilding one small step at a time. And every brick I laid felt like a shift. Away from the man I used to be. The one who begged for a seat at a table that never had space for him. I'm Callum Ridgway. After months of silence in Oregon, the past started creeping back. Not loud or chaotic, but soft, like echoes I couldn't quite shake.
I
Had found a solid routine here. Work, walks with Booker, coffee with Sarah, beers with Pete, and it felt steady like the life I had always wanted but didn't know I
could have.
The studio had become home with its thrift store shelves and the ocean song at
Night.
I had stopped checking my phone for messages from Marissa or her family, stopped bracing for their next move.
I
Thought I'd left them all behind, but then, one morning I opened my laptop and saw an email from her. It wasn't much, just a few words, no subject, but it hit me like a wave. I sat there at my small table, coffee cooling in my hands, staring at her name on the screen. Part of me wanted to delete it, to protect the peace I'd worked so hard to create. But another part, the stubborn side of me, clicked it open. She didn't beg me to come back.
didn't try to make
Me feel guilty, like her mother would have.
it was.
Simpler than that and sadder, too. I see it. Now, Callum, she wrote. How it fell apart. I was so busy trying to keep them happy. Mom, Gregory, all of them, that I didn't see I was losing you.
I'm sorry.
That was it. No promises, no pleading, just regret laid out clearly and quietly. I read it twice, then leaned back in my chair, letting it settle. Booker nudged at my leg, whining for his walk, but I stayed there, staring at the
Words.
It wasn't anger that hit me.
I'd
Burned through that a long time ago.
It was.
Something else, a tired ache.
She saw it now, she said.
But where was that clarity when I was standing in front of her, asking her to choose me? Where was it when I was packing my bag, waiting for her to say something, anything, to stop me? I didn't reply.
Not
Because I was mad, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because there was nothing left to say. Silence felt truer than any words I could send back.
It was.
The answer she'd never heard when I was still there, still trying. I closed the laptop, grabbed Booker's leash, and walked him to the beach, letting the wind and the waves drown out the echo of her email. The sand was cold beneath my boots, and Booker ran ahead, chasing gulls, while I walked slowly, hands in my pockets, thinking it over. She'd lost me long before I left, and I'd lost her,
too.
somewhere between her family's expectations and my breaking point.
That
Email didn't change anything. It just confirmed what I already knew. I was done carrying her regret along with my own. A few months later, another letter came, this time by mail, handwritten, on thick paper that smelled faintly of Blee's perfume. I knew it was from her before I even opened it. Marissa didn't write letters, but her mother loved the drama of it. I stood by the mailbox, the ocean rumbling in the distance, and tore it open. Callum, it started all formal and sharp. You broke my daughter's heart. You walked away from your responsibilities, from our family, and left her to pick up the pieces. I hope you're proud of yourself. The rest was more of the same. Condescension dripping from every line, blaming me as if I'd torn their perfect world apart.
I
Read it once, standing there in the wind, then walked inside and fed it to the shredder by my desk. The machine chewed it up, and I watched the fragments fall into the trash, feeling nothing but relief. Blee didn't get it. Never would. She thought I'd broken Marissa, but Marissa had broken herself, choosing them over me, time and time again. I wasn't proud of leaving, but I wasn't ashamed either. It was what I had to do to breathe again. I didn't owe her An answer. Didn't owe her anything.
Anymore.
The shredder clicked off, and I took Booker for another walk, letting the salty air clear my head.
Those
Echoes. Marissa's email, Blee's letter. Kept coming, but they didn't stick.
I'd
Built too much here to let them pull me back. Work was steady now. My clients relied on me, and I liked the weight of that, how it kept me grounded.
Pete.
And I had started fishing on weekends, just a small boat and quiet hours on the water, and Sarah would tease me about my sunburn when I came into the shop after. Ellie called sometimes, telling me about her life back east, and I'd tell her about Booker's latest trick, or the view from my balcony.
It was
Small, this world I'd made, but it was solid, and it didn't bend to anyone else's rules. The past could echo all it wanted. Marissa could regret. Blee could
rage.
But I wasn't listening anymore. I'd found my footing one step at a time. And every day I stayed away, those voices got quieter.
I'd sit out on the
Bluff some nights, watching the waves crash beneath the stars and feel the truth
settle in.
I didn't need their forgiveness. Didn't need their understanding. I had this. The ocean. The dog, the people who didn't care. Where I came from. And it was enough. I'm Callum Ridgway, and it's been a year since I walked out of that big house in New York. A year since I bought that one-way ticket to Oregon and decided to stop explaining myself. The divorce is final now. Papers signed, lawyers paid. All the loose ends tied up neatly and
clean.
I live in a modest place on a bluff overlooking the Pacific. A step up from the studio, but still simple, with a
porch where I can sit and watch the
water stretch out forever. I wake up early most days, make coffee, and take Booker for a walk along the shore before I settle into work. Still in tech, still fixing systems and solving problems, but on my terms now. The air's always got that salty bite, and the sound of the waves is constant, like a heartbeat I've grown used to. It's not a flashy life, but it's mine, and that's the biggest change of all. I don't answer to anyone anymore. Back when I left, Marissa wanted an apology. She wanted me to bend one last time to fit her world. But I chose the ticket instead. And I've never looked back. The condo, her family, that whole suffocating mess. It's just a memory now, fading more. Every day I spend here, I think about it sometimes. How I spent 7 years trying to be what they wanted, twisting myself into knots to prove I was good enough. Her mother, Blee, with her cold stares and sharper words. Gregory with his smirks and jabs.
And
Marissa caught between them and me, always picking their side when it mattered. I used to wonder if I could have fought harder, stayed longer.
But
out here, with the ocean before me, and Booker at my feet, I know I did the
right thing.
Leaving wasn't running.
It
was saving myself. The divorce took months to settle, longer than it should have, because Marissa dragged her
feet.
She didn't fight it outright, didn't show up with lawyers screaming, but she stalled, missed deadlines, asked for extensions, thinking I'd change my mind if she waited me out.
I didn't.
My lawyer handled most of it, and I kept my distance, sending emails when I had to, keeping it brief and to the point. When the final papers came through, I signed them at my kitchen table, the pen scratching loud in the quiet, and felt a weight lift I didn't know was still there. It was done.
No
more ties, no more claims. Just me and the life I built out here. I've got my routines. Work in the mornings, hikes, or fishing with Pete on weekends, coffee with Sarah when she's not swamped at the shop. Ellie came to visit once, stayed a week, and we sat on the porch every night talking about everything and nothing. She said I looked different, lighter, and I told her I felt it too. Booker's grown into himself still. Scruffy, but smarter now, and he's my shadow, following me from room to room, sleeping by the door like he's guarding
It.
the people in town know me. Not my whole story, just the parts one choose to share, and they don't ask for more. Pete calls me Kel like it's always been my name. And Sarah started trusting me with the shop's books when her numbers don't add
Up.
It's a community not forced or fake, just people living their lives alongside mine. I don't explain myself
Anymore.
not to them, not to anyone. That's the real freedom. The thing I didn't know I'd lost until I got it back. Back in New York, I was always justifying why I did what I did, why I wasn't like them, why I deserved a seat at their table. Here, no one cares.
I.
Show up. I do my work. I crack a beer with Pete or toss a stick for Booker. And that's enough.
I don't owe anyone my story.
Don't have to prove I'm worth something. Marissa's family thought love came with conditions. Obey, fit in, apologize when you step out of line.
But
I've learned it doesn't have to. Ellie loves me because I'm her brother.
Pete.
Because I'm a friend. Booker because I'm his person. It's simple, and simple is what I needed all along. I think about Marissa sometimes. Wonder what she's doing now that the papers are
Signed.
maybe she's still in the condo, still going to those family dinners, still trying to keep Blee happy. Her email from months back, the one about regret, sits unanswered in my inbox, and I've never felt the need to change that. She made her choice back then, picking them over me, and I made mine when I walked out. We're even now, in a way, both free to live how we want, just not together. I don't hate her, don't even resent her anymore. It's just done.
The
Bluff's my home now, with its wide views and peaceful nights. And every day I spend here, I feel more like the man I was meant to be. I work hard, keep things simple, and let the ocean smooth out the
rest.
no apologies, no looking back. Just me, my dog, my people, in a life I built my way.